Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of TimeXtender Tuesdays. Today we're going to be talking about implementing date dimensions, what they're for, why they're used, and why they're important in a data warehouse, and of course how to implement them in TimeXtender. So what is a date dimension? Well, a date dimension is really used for categorizing data in different time periods, right? When you're analyzing data, oftentimes you want to aggregate or categorize data by specific time periods like weeks or months, quarters, years. Oftentimes organizations don't follow the normal calendar year. They have something called a fiscal year. And this is often staggered by 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. So for example, Microsoft, their fiscal year starts in July. So their Q1 of their fiscal year starts in July. And so the way that they organize their data on certain financial reports is going to be different from a typical calendar year. And so it's important to be able to have those dates available so you can show those reports accordingly. Another great example is like schools. Schools follow the semester system. And so what if you wanted to see, how many students you had per semester? You would need some way to categorize your data by these different time periods. So let me show some examples. So in this example, this report is, first of all, you can see a bar chart here on the bottom left that's categorizing this bar chart. The x-axis is categorized by quarter. So you see, on the far left, 2013 Q1, 2013 Q2, so on and so forth. And then on the left-hand side, you have the ability to select and filter based on year or quarter. Within that, you can go down to the month. And then additionally, you could even filter based on the week number, right? So being able to go through and filter based on a specific week and see data filtered based on that. So the question is, how is this made possible? Well, typically this is made possible by creating a table that has every date that may be used in your data warehouse, right? So this means every date from the beginning you started using a certain data source to oftentimes multiple years out into the future. If you're ever doing predictive analytics, you'll need all of those dates too, right? So this table has to have all of those dates. Oftentimes you're analyzing data, historical data from 15, 20, 30 years back. So this date table has to have everything. And then in different columns, it's going to have which category those certain dates fall into. So what was the day of the week for this date? What was the week number, the month, the quarter, the year? And then we can use this information to filter down our data and categorize our reports by these different time periods. Typically, as you can imagine, given how many dates you have in the past, how many dates you need to have in the future, and as time goes on, you need to be adding more and more dates. As you can imagine, this would be quite cumbersome to have to manually script out by hand. But luckily, we have TimeXtender. So let's see how it's done. For this exercise, you're not really going to need much, just a TimeXtender app server to be able to implement this. Of course, if you want to visualize the data, you'll need some sort of visualization platform. In this exercise today, I'll be implementing the date table in TimeXtender, and then I'll be building out a analysis services tabular model and showing that in PowerBI. So let's go ahead and get started. Step number 1. We need to open up our project, and then in a data warehouse, we need to right click on tables and add a date table. So let's open up TimeXtender. Here I have a small data warehouse, and then I do have my purchasing semantic model where we want to add in our date dimension. So we can right click on tables here and then add a date table. So I have a number of different options. I typically just call my date table date to make it super simple. And then you'll provide it with a date range. Okay, so when do you want this date table to start? The best thing to do here is to look through some of your bigger transaction tables and find out how far they go back. This will tell you how far and what your start date you want to use for this. In this case, I'm going to use 2011. And then you can define a specific end date, or you can tell TimeXtender just to keep populating the table with a certain number of days in advance. By default, it's 1,095 days. This is 3 years. So that should give us plenty of days in the future where we'll have plenty of dates in our table. We can adjust the formatting of the dates. Depending on the part of the world that you're in, you might want to use and adjust these. In this case, I'm just going to keep all of these as default. First day of the week, first week of the year, so on and so forth. And then we have the fiscal year. This is what I was discussing earlier. Now, by default, we just have calendar year. In this case, I do want to show what using that staggered fiscal year looks like. So let's choose staggered here. And I'm going to go in and use July as my first month for my staggered fiscal year. And as I showed before, we can implement custom periods. So let's say we are a university and we want to have here our different semesters listed as custom periods in our date dimension. We can click add. We can go in and type what those are, the start date, the end date for those custom periods. We can also import these custom periods from an Excel spreadsheet or CSV file. So that'll allow us to bring those custom periods in pretty quickly, and then we'll have those will automatically get added to our date dimension. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click OK, and this will create our date table. You'll notice my date table is added right here. I normally just drag it right to the top so I know where my date dimension is, just keeping it right up there at the top. Makes it pretty easy. All right, and then expanding this, you see a number of different fields being added. So each one of those different criteria that I told you before needs to have its own field. So to allow for the most flexibility, TimeXtender adds by default all of these fields, both for the regular calendar year, and as you scroll down, you'll see fiscal. And so as those fiscal years dates get adjusted, you'll see new value in those dates as well, or in those columns as well. Okay, so I want to persist this data, so I'm going to go ahead and deploy and execute. Deploy and execute the date dimension only takes really just a few seconds. So it'll create that table, again, all the data types implemented, and then of course populate that table with data for me. So populated the data. Now we can take a look at this, and I'm going to go ahead and preview this table. So just so we know, let's go ahead and do a quick row count here. So we have 5,000 different dates. So back from 2011 all the way up until 3 years from today. That's going to give me 5,000 rows. So, and then for each of these rows, we have day of the month, day name, day of the week in a year, different week formatting, week numbers. We can see the month name, the month number. As we go further, we have half years. Sometimes you look at the first half of the year, second half of the year, especially in financial reports. Quarters, we can see different quarters here. We have first day of the month last, first day of the year, last day of the year, so on and so forth. So we have a lot of different options to choose from when categorizing our reports. A couple things I want you to pay attention to here are these keys. Now these keys are pretty important when we are sorting. So here we see month key, and here we see half year key. I'm going to scroll a little bit further to the left. We'll use some other examples. Okay, so week key is a great example. I use this one all the time. Yeah, so we have month key and week key. So when you're sorting this data in, let's say, in Power BI, oftentimes things by default are sorted alphabetically. And when you sort the months of the year alphabetically, we all know that they're not going to be in the correct order. We don't want to sort them alphabetically. We want to sort them by how they fit into the calendar, right? The first month, the second month, the third month, so on and so forth. And so what we have here is a month key. And you can use this month key in your sort by column in analysis services. If your visualization platform has a sort by column, you'll want to use these month keys or these different keys in the date dimension to sort these values. And we'll be using these as we go through and implement our semantic model in TimeXtender. Okay, so we've created our date dimension. Let's take a look at the next step in here. So the next step is we want to relate to the fact table date fields. So any date fields, any fact tables that have date fields, and we want to categorize or filter by them, we're going to need to relate our date dimension to those. And let's take a look. We have here our purchase transactions table. Let's see how we can relate our date dimension to this table. So if we look through our purchase transactions table, we'll see we have a couple of dates here. We have order date and due date. Now, a couple really important things you need to be aware of when relating a date dimension to your fact table. First and foremost, okay, let's go ahead and open this up in a new tab, how we normally do our relations in TimeXtender, and then I'll drag date value onto due date. And if you notice the red no symbol there, this is not going to work, and that's because the default data type here for the date table is a date time. Now, if most of your dates in your data warehouse are date time, that's great. If most of them are date time 2, you can actually change this to date time 2. So you just click change to date time 2, and that'll be done for you. I'm going to go ahead and leave this in date time, and what I want to do here is I can actually convert this from date time 2, and I'm just going to edit this field and actually change that to a date and time data type, which will make it the same data type as the one in TimeXtender's date dimension. This will allow me to then create that relation. So I can now create that relation. Go ahead and create the relation. So I'm going to create the relation to order date and to due date here. And what we'll be doing with this is we'll be creating what's called a role-playing dimension. So we're going to use the same date table, the same values, none of those change, but the way in which it is joined to the fact table actually changes the data. So we'll be able to look at our order dates and our due dates. We could even do calculations that convert the two, like to find the difference between those two dates. So we'll be able to do that by using a role-playing dimension. It also allows us to use these various joins without having to duplicate the data in the date dimension. All right, the second really important thing that you want to be aware of when relating data. If you notice this data type here, this is a date time data type, which means that it can include times as well as dates. And if we look at our date table, sorry, let me preview this. You'll notice in here, our date table does not have times in it. The time is at 0, which is essentially 12 a.m., the start of the day, right? So we only have dates and not times. And so what that means is if you have time in your date field, that join is not going to work. You can't join these tables together. It's not going to find a matching foreign key result. So you have to ensure that these dates are date only and don't include a time. So you want to have the date time data type, but make sure they're date only. Now there is a transformation in TimeXtender that allows you to do this. You just right click, let's add a field transformation here, and then we can go to only date. We'll click on only date and add that transformation in there. We'll do the same for this one, field transformation. We'll go to only date and add that in. Great. So now we've added those transformations. This is going to convert any times that might be in there to 0, and it's only going to show the date. This means that that date is going to now be able to be related to our date dimension. Great. So we have our relations. We've done our conversions. Let's now add our date dimension into our semantic model. So I'm going to bring this from here into my purchasing semantic model. Now, it's important to understand what we're doing here is we're changing the context of this date table. In our data warehouse, it's just a generic date table that could be applied to anything. When we bring it over into our semantic model, we're changing the context. In this context, we're looking at the orders, the order date of certain purchases, right? So I'm going to put in here order date. This is the order date dimension of our purchase semantic model. And then we can go through and choose the fields that we might want in our date dimension. So I'm going to put date value. Let's see, we want day of the week. Let's see, I want to do month key, month name, week key, week name. I also want year. Where are my quarters? Quarter key, quarter name. And then I also want year, month name, year, quarter name, and year, week name. So these are ones that I commonly use. I find it's helpful to have both the quarter and the quarter name, or the year quarter name. This also appends the year to that value, which makes it easier to sort if you're just looking at the quarter, for example. And then of course those keys that we talked about, we want to be able to sort properly. So I also added the keys in there. All right, so now that I've added those, let's go ahead and click OK. And I've added that in. So which relations do we want to choose? Let's do order date. And now I have order date in my purchasing semantic model. Now to create that role-playing dimension we talked about earlier, we go ahead and we drag date in a second time. So we're actually going to have two date dimensions in here. We have order date and then we have due date. So again, I'm going to choose the same ones here. Date value, day of the week, right? That's what we picked there before. And then let's go through and let's do month key, month name, quarter key, quarter name, week key, week name, and then of course year, month name, year, quarter name, year, week name. Great. And here I want to use the due date relationship. Click OK, and now I have order date and due date added in here. Great. So we have some fields. Now let's do our formatting for our dimension here. First of all, the keys are only useful for sorting. So the first thing I want to do is actually hide those away. So I'm going to hide these keys, month key, quarter key, week key. And we'll just do all of our formatting, our setup on one of these dimensions here. We don't need to necessarily go through that twice. So I hid my keys away. Another thing I can do, now I need to set my sort by fields. Okay, so the sort by, so month name is going to be sorted by month key. So I go in here and edit, and I choose month key on the sort by. And then year, month name, I'm going to reorder that, edit that, and then again sort by that month key. So both of those, quarter key, sort by quarter name, sorted by quarter key, year, quarter name, also sorted by quarter name, sorry, quarter key. All right, so see the sort by, and then the week we want to do the same thing here. Week key, sort by, week key. Got it. All right, so we have all of these sorted. Another thing that we can implement here in TimeXtender is some hierarchies. It can be very useful to have these hierarchies, especially in PowerBI, other visualization tools as well. But having these hierarchies allows you to do some really fun, useful stuff, including drill through for your date dimensions. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute here. But let's go ahead and implement some hierarchies. So I'm going to right click on my date dimension and I'm going to click add hierarchy. And for this one, we want to do year, quarter, month, day. So year, quarter, month, day hierarchy. And we put in our order date. And we are going to start with the year. And then we go to quarter, month, and day, which is just the date value. All right, so we have year, quarter, month, day. Great. That's our monthly, quarterly hierarchy. Let's go ahead and add another hierarchy. This is another common hierarchy. If you do a lot of categorization by week numbers, this is a common one too. So year, week, day. And again, order date, we want to do year and then our week name, and then of course our date value. Great. So now we have that hierarchy. Two very common hierarchies used for financial reporting and analysis. So we have our date dimension in there. We have all the filtering, formatting done. Let's go ahead and deploy and execute and see what this looks like. Okay, so we finished deploying and executing. Now let's take a look at this in Power BI. All right, let's open up Power BI, and now what we can do is we can add some categorization, first of all, to our bar chart. So here we have our bar chart. We're analyzing order amounts as well as order quantities here, but we want to categorize this bar chart by our date dimension. So let's look at order date, and a nice thing to do again is use our hierarchy for this. So what I can do is simply just drag in the hierarchy itself into the axis. So we plug that in there. And then as you can see at the very top of that hierarchy is year. And so these are sorted by year. So we can do another number of interesting things now. We can add drill down. So if we click on turn on drill down, we can drill into one of these years and drill to the next level in the hierarchy. So for example, here, 2015, I can go down to the next level and see the quarters, and then drill down to one of those quarters and then see the 3 months in those quarters. Some other things we can do is we can drill back to the top, turn off drill down, or we could do expand all levels in the hierarchy. So I can expand down and now look at, again, quarters. So this is a spread of all the quarters, and then we can break it down even further and spread out all the months. Again, if you notice our sorting is done very well, exactly how we would expect. Starting at the earliest time period and then moving down that time period, January, February, March, April, May, June. It's not being sorted by alphabetical order. It's being done actually by the time. So yeah, and that's again because we set those sort by columns. That's pretty important. So we're able to sort. Now we can add some filters. We could add slicers. I like to use a matrix sometimes for my filters. So what if we wanted to say, oh, let's look at Q3 of 2015. And we just click there and it filters right down. So, so now we can see exactly the 3 months of Q3 in 2015. So that makes that a lot easier. Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed how to implement date dimensions in TimeXtender. If you have any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat. If you enjoyed the video and you're interested in seeing more content, please give us a subscribe. You can like the video and you can click on the bell if you'd like to get notifications. This channel is exclusively for TimeXtender Tuesdays, so you're not going to be spammed by any other content, really just instructional videos on how to implement all things TimeXtender. Again, hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.